All right, I've tried to get a little bit cozy here because today I just want to kind of record a long, rambly video of me talking about various cameras that I've used in 2024, what I liked about them, what I didn't like about them, what I think I'm going to keep, and what I think I will sell. So let's jump right in. I think the first camera I'll talk about is definitely the smallest one that I got this year. This is a Minox 35ML, and these cameras are pretty easy to find here in Germany. I've bought a lot of them. I've tried a lot of different ones. I can definitely say this is my favorite. First of all, I just want to talk about the design. On most of these cameras, they have a simple flap here on the front that you actually pull down. One of the things I really like about this model, which again is the 35ML, is that it has a button that you push to get it to open up. Usually when I'm out on the street, I kind of fidget when I'm feeling nervous about taking street photos or whatever. And so I would just sort of push the button, open and close, push the button, open and close. And that was a pretty enjoyable fidget experience. These cameras, most of the time, also only have an aperture priority mode. So you set here on the front of the lens, I'm not sure you can see the numbers. You set the aperture you want, 2.8, 4, 5.6. On this one, all the way down to f16. And the camera decides the shutter. What I really like about this one, and as far as I know, it's the only one of all the different models, it actually has a P mode where the camera decides everything for you. And I found that for this, being a small street shooter, I would usually keep it on the P mode and just sort of run and gun unless I knew I wanted a very specific kind of depth of field. The other thing about these cameras, they're all, as far as I know, double stroke cameras. And then you shoot. Never really bothered me. This one is pretty enjoyable. When you advance the film, it's a nice experience, but some of them, instead of having a plastic tab like this with a pretty good grip on it, they're made out of metal and it will really tear up your finger using it all day long. The other thing about all these cameras is they have a tiny winding wheel for rewinding, and I hate the experience of rewinding films on these cameras. Again, I found this one to be the most reliable, but the last few rolls that I put through had some exposure problems. Still, it's a great camera for taking on vacation. I took it on vacation in the summer. I took it on roller coasters. I took it to the beach. It's the kind of thing you just feel like you can throw in any pocket, also into a jeans pocket, and always have it with you. The picture quality can be great when the exposure works right. When you nail the focus, you can get great photos. And one of my favorite photos that I took this year, I took on that camera. So I'm happy for it being in my life, but I don't know if I'm going to keep it. Okay. All right. So moving right along. I also got real into these cameras here, which are made by a company called Leidolf. And Leidolf was based in Wetzlar, which is the same city in Germany where Leicas were made. And I guess you could say they were competitors. They were made in as far as I remember, the 50s and 60s. And you can find these cameras super cheap, super easily on eBay here in Germany. Also at flea markets, you always see these in leather cases. And I think they're very, very, very underrated. The first one I got was this smaller version, which is kind of comparable to like an early Leica camera. It's a rangefinder, but instead of having a shutter in the back, it has a leaf shutter in the front, which I really, really love. The leaf shutter is actually my favorite kind. It's also a double stroke camera, and you've got your shutter button here on the front on the lens instead of up on top. Super underrated camera. I might do a review of these and talk more about them. The lenses I've found in my experience are great. They're very sharp. And what's great is that they're interchangeable lenses, which it's not super rare for a leaf shutter system, but I haven't found many where you've got a rangefinder, a leaf shutter, and you can change the lens on the front. I really enjoyed using these. I also use them with a flash. You can hook it up here in the front to this little sync port and use it with any shutter speed that you want. Again, this is the smaller one. I also got this larger one. Basically just the top here has been expanded a little bit. I think I prefer this more, but what I don't like is the images all have rounded corners, because basically the mask here for your negatives has rounded edges, and I should probably just file them away. Usually in Photoshop, I Photoshop them out. Kind of annoying. I think I would like it probably shooting slide film, because once they went into the little frames, you wouldn't even notice it. But it's the one thing I don't like about the smaller version. I think you should go with these models, the rangefinders, where you have control over everything. There's some other ones that are even cheaper, but I would not recommend those. This is a Lordo Matte, and I think this one's also called a Lordo Matte, but just slightly different. Take a screenshot, look for these. Oh, and before I put them aside for the rest of the video, they win the award for Best Advanced Lever. Even though it's a double stroke, it could be a triple stroke camera for all I care. I would just love pulling on that little lever. It's so satisfying. It's so mechanical. Sometimes I sit around with this camera literally at home on the sofa watching TV. There's no film in it, and I'll just wind and shoot and wind and shoot. It's like, it's addictive. These cameras feel incredible. Similar kind of idea are these Kodak Retina cameras. I feel like Mary Poppins, like, got this big bag and just like pulling out infinite amount of stuff. I'll show the kind of first model or kind of first version of this type of camera. This is the Retina 2. What's amazing about these is they have a 2.0 lens. It's a 50 millimeter lens. This one, you need to have film in the camera in order to be able to fire the shutter, because the sprockets have to move in order for you to be able to fire the shutter. Super satisfying camera to use. Again, I took this on vacation. It's got a rangefinder, super easy to use. I felt like I was living in the 1950s on vacation at the beach, and I had the coolest camera in the world hanging on my shoulder, and I loved using this thing. It feels like a tank. It feels like, you know, like a turtle shell here on top. The thing, when it folds back together, that protects the lens. The more fancier and kind of newer or later version of this camera is a Retina 3C, which is also 2.0 lens, 50 millimeters, the standard lens that comes with this. And this model, you can actually change the lens. However, I wouldn't recommend it. I bought two different 35 millimeter lenses for the system, and I found them both pretty useless. The sharpness isn't great, colors aren't great. I feel like these are really made to be used with the 50 millimeter. So I wouldn't ever think about this, or I would never recommend this as like a camera system where you can use multiple focal lengths. I really think it's made for using the 50 millimeter. The other thing that's great about this is it has a light meter actually, and you can either read on a really sunny day with the light just going through that small hole, or you can pop this open in more low light situations. And then you've got here on the back a little needle that moves, and you line it up, and you've got a number that corresponds to a number down here that you set. I won't go into all the details, but it's super easy to use, and I loved going out with this one as well. The only complaint I really have about it is that it's heavy. So carrying this on a shoulder strap around my shoulder all day long, I would really notice it in comparison to some of those other cameras that I just showed, which were much, much smaller. But we'll put the Kodaks away for now. Again, that's a Kodak Retina 2 and Retina 3C. Another little camera I'll show, which I really didn't use much, but I still like a lot, is this little Pentax that I picked up at a secondhand shop in Strasbourg, if I'm not mistaken. This is the Pentax MV. There's a lot of different Pentax M cameras. This one's pretty much auto, meaning that you set your aperture and the camera does the rest. You also have to do your focus. This is a 28 millimeter lens, which I've really enjoyed using. And what I love about this camera, first of all, is that it's black. I love the look of it. It's got brass underneath that's been rubbed away, but it's just super fast as well. You know, if you're looking for a good, cheap starter street camera, I would really recommend this. You can take it out, set to, if it's a sunny day, if you've got enough light or a fast film, set it to f8, f11, and just, you know, snap away. Get a focal range or a kind of a zone that you like set up on the lens. Use a 28 millimeter like this, and I think you'll have a great time. Feels great in your hand, super small, not that light of a camera, but again, this is just a camera I really like taking into my hand and taking photos with. All right, speaking of another fast street camera, this was for a long time last winter, pretty much my everyday street camera. A lot of the photos that I have on Instagram were taken with this. It's a Review 900. And this is basically the same. And by basically, I mean, it is the same as the Chinon 3001, which is something Trevor Wisecup has talked a lot about and uses a lot. Some of the photos you'll see on his Instagram were taken with that camera, and they are identical. This was just how the camera was packaged for sale in Germany. Same exact lens, same exact system. This camera feels awesome in your hand. For a point and shoot, it's really big and kind of a brick, but it just fits perfectly into your grip. Also, you can turn it on with one hand and be ready to shoot. You know, I have the dog's on the leash. My left hand is pretty much occupied, but I could still take this out super fast, get it open, and snap a picture of some moment and get the moment before it was gone. Autofocus. The autofocus on this is out of this world. I don't know how it works. I don't know how it gets it right. I feel like there's some kind of face detection or eye detection, but that sounds crazy for a point and shoot of this era. Nonetheless, I will just say again, it's like magic. It gets the focus right nearly every time. I have no complaints about it. This is one of the best cameras I've ever used in my life. Very underrated. Sometimes hard to find, sometimes easy to find. A friend of mine told me he picked one of these up for €6 recently at a flea market. If you see one and it's €6, you got to buy it. Get a battery, put a battery in it, see if it works. I'm not sure, though, having said all that, whether I'm really going to keep it, because I'm kind of starting to move away from the 35 millimeter focal length, which is what this has. It has a 2.8 35 millimeter lens. Great lens, super sharp. Colors are fantastic. Flash is great. You can also push a button right here to turn the flash off. I love this camera also in low light, so suppressing the flash, because I believe it can only go to a shutter speed of 1/45th of a second at 2.8. And you get this underexposed look when you're out in the world on the subway or in some space where there's a lot of indoor lighting. Anywhere it looks good when you suppress the flash and shoot with this camera. All that said, I still really don't know if I'm going to keep it. If I sell it, I'm going to sell it for a lot, though, because I love it so much. I don't want to let it go for €6. You can better believe that. All right. I said I'm moving away from the 35 millimeter focal length, and a big reason for that is this here. Legendary camera. I got it because I was obsessed this year a bit again with Henri Cartier-Bresson. Otherwise known in America as Henri Cartier-Bresson. This is basically the same camera setup that he used. Shot so many amazing photographs with it. 50 millimeter lens, f3.5. This is the Leica 3C. So these came before the whole M series. They have lenses that screw on instead of having a mount that clicks in. And, you know, like I said, I got this camera to try and emulate. Here we go. I'm going to fudge the name again. Henri Cartier-Bresson. But what I found is that a lot of the photos that I shot with this, especially using color film, looked like Eggleston photos. And I want to do another video about this. If you're interested for me to talk more about that, leave a comment down below. But the point is that the colors that came out of this lens in particular are just stunning. They're so painterly. The lens is sharp, but it produces colors and a resolution and a kind of micro contrast that is very hard to describe other than to say that it's incredibly painterly and incredibly beautiful. And I love the images I get out of this camera. It is a pain to load. If you want to know more about that, there's a lot of videos on YouTube about how to load these cameras. I still love it. I have it with me pretty much every day, and it's made me fall in love with 50 millimeter lenses, and it's the reason why I'm moving away from 35 millimeter lenses. I'll go into that in another video, but again, really love that camera. Similarly, I wanted to get something that would be a little bit easier to load, but I could use the same lenses on. So I picked up this Canon 7. I used to have a Canon P that I used a lot, which also had the same lens mount, but I've really enjoyed using this. One thing it has that the older Leica doesn't have is parallax correction. So you've got a great viewfinder here that's very big, very bright, and your frame lines move up and down as you focus so that you don't cut people's heads off, which I had in one photo shoot that I did, and really bummed me out because I was shooting with the Leica. But this really helps you to get your framing exactly precise. It's a bit heavier, it's a bit bulkier, but I've enjoyed using it. I feel like it's a better version of the Canon P, even though it's a bit uglier. You know, it's got this like giant robot eye in the front. But all the details of this camera are good. Winding feels good. The shutter feels good. Setting your shutter speed, turning this dial feels good. Rewinding, everything you can set and change on this camera. When you do it, it feels good, feels natural, feels the way you want a camera to feel in your hands. All right, the last and the biggest, most expensive thing I'll talk about is this Rolleiflex here. I made a video recently asking whether the Mamiya C3 was better than a Rolleiflex, and I do definitely think they can compete with each other. I've only had this a few days so far, but I can say I really enjoy using it at least as much as I did the Mamiya, if not maybe a little bit more. This model was one of the models used by Vivian Maier, obviously not the same one, but just the same model, and it is in pristine condition. I mean, there's not a scratch, there's not a dent anywhere. Even the strap honestly looks like it's been sitting in the case for the last 70 years. And the design of this camera is just so beautiful. Every little detail still feels elegant and modern, and everybody that walks by you is going to look at your camera. Like, especially, I would say, dudes who seem to be a little bit more wealthy. Every single one of them that walks by stares at this camera. People will talk to you. People will ask you questions about it. It's just a beauty. It's a stunning object that I think brings kind of happiness to anyone who looks at it, including myself. I mean, this is definitely a camera I just will sit around and stare at on the shelf or take into my hands and sort of ogle. Love the lens so far. This is a planar 80mm 2.8, and it has the kind of crunchiness that I was looking for in a Rolleiflex, and also the kind of contrast and the resolution that I was looking for in a Rolleiflex, which I had tried some other models and they didn't quite have that look, but so far I've only put one roll through it, but I was so happy when I saw that crunch in the images and just that kind of hyper-realistic look to the images. So I'm very excited to shoot more with this, to put color film through it. I think probably going to end up being that my two everyday cameras, and I'm going to look like I'm really strutting and like, you know, showing off, will be the Rolleiflex and the Leica 3C. Because also they're both just so stylish. I mean, every time I look at this, if it's sitting on the table at a cafe where I'm at, or on my dresser here at home, or if it's on my shoulder, or I take it out of my pocket, every time I see this camera, you know, I have that Marie Kondo-esque feeling of joy, and I love it, and I want to take photos, and I want to have it in my hand, and I want to have it up to my eye. This is getting very sensual very quickly, but I think that adds a lot to the photography experience. Same for the Rolleiflex. So I really think these two are probably going to become my everyday combo cameras. All right, I'm going to leave it at that because this is getting really long, really quick. I hope maybe you could see some cameras that you hadn't heard about before. Maybe it'll inspire you to go out, use some of the Christmas money that you got, and try one of these cameras. They're all terrific. They're all cameras that I love to use, although I probably will sell some of them throughout the year. If you want to know more about one model, if you want to see a whole video about one of these cameras, please let me know. Write down below in the comments, and see you next time.